I'm Stephen John Drew from the official GonnaGeek.com show, a weekly geek news podcast that is a part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Start with your tone.
Are you telling me you built a time machine?
There is no school.
We got us cookie classes.
These aren't the droids, Julian.
Get away from her, you bitch!
Well, let me finish them, please.
I only have one rule. Everyone fights, no one quits.
It's the Sci-Fi Sunday podcast, version 2.0.
Welcome back to the Sci-Fi Sunday podcast version 2.0. I'm your host, David S. Dawson, and I'm coming at you tonight from Austin, Texas. Deep in the heart of Texas. Joining me out here in Texas are my frequent collaborators on the podcast, Mike Darth Maul Peterson.
The force is strong with this one.
Theresa the Twi'lek Dawson.
I can't.
And Julian Jar Jar Lopez.
Misa back.
Oh, Jar Jar.
Welcome back, guys.
What's up?
So tonight we're going to be doing our in-depth review of Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, which is the oldest of the Star Wars movies, if not the first chronologically in canon of the films. But before we get to that, I'd like to recognize our podcast network, the Gonna Geek Network, which we recently joined, and I want to thank them once again for supporting our podcasts. It's wonderful to be a part of a network full of so many geeky, wonderful people. And I want to point out a show that you might have some interest in, which is Game Life Balance Australia. They're on episode 91, and this week their hosts AC and Rob discuss a samurai western for the PlayStation 2, their featured game for the week, as well as Hanna-Barbera cartoons, Total War Empire, Solitude, Game Boy games, and what went wrong with Mario Maker 2. Plus, Rob reports back on his experiences in the darkest of darkest dungeons, and AC revisits the Gianna sisters' Twisted Dreams on the Nintendo Switch. All that and more on Game Life Balance Australia. Be sure to check it out at the Gonna Geek Network at GonnaGeek.com.
Wow, that was a lot.
Yeah. So.
Good job.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Star Wars. The one that we affectionately used to just refer to as Star Wars. Because it didn't say A New Hope when it first released in theaters.
No,
I don't know if you guys know that. But that's the truth. George Lucas has gotten a lot of grief in the last 10 to 20 years for making tweaks continually to the films. But I think people forget that in the original theatrical run of Star Wars, it was like year and a half or 2 years that it was running in theaters, because the theatrical runs were a lot longer back in the day. He kept making changes and releasing newer versions of the film into the theaters, like all through that first year and a half.
That's how I was first exposed to it, was
For
those
the first year and a half?
Those DVDs, yellow and gold DVD sets.
Yes, the trilogy pack.
That was my first time I ever being exposed to really Star Wars.
You and I,
VHS packs.
You and I are right around the same, but it was 90. I want to say it was 97 when they came out with the special editions when they came back in theaters.
And that's when you got the bug.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he saw it with special editions.
Yeah, so I've never seen the original.
I remember as close to the original as most people will remember.
Yeah.
And that's, so there's, before we get into the in-depth review, there's all these people who are like, release the theatrical edition of Star Wars, get rid of the special editions. And to my point, the original theatrical edition of Star Wars, not everybody who went to see quote-unquote first run even saw that original theatrical run, because it kept getting tweaked and refined as he was able to complete special effects, because ILM was, behind schedule trying to get this movie done. And they were inventing ways of creating the special effects and getting things done. And so, my question is what version are people really talking about when they say release the original theatrical cut? Because I don't think anybody really remembers what that was.
Well, I've seen some footage. Do you remember specifically seeing like the footage or the movie without Jabba? And how?
Oh yeah,
yeah. No, you remember all that?
Jabba didn't come back until the special edition.
Yeah. Oh.
In Star Wars: A New Hope, you never saw Jabba, and you didn't need to see Jabba. Like it didn't detract from the movie. Jabba was just this mysterious gangster person that Han refers to as owing debts to.
Yeah, you just kind of think of it like someone talking about Al Capone and stuff like. You hear about
Godfather,
the Godfather of the gangsters. That's just kind of what you felt like this was when you didn't see. Yeah.
Yeah, and to some of the arguments. Now, they did shoot him talking to Jabba originally, and that's the footage they're using in the special editions. But it was a dude in a big furry, outfit and just kind of a fat dude, and it's not a big deal, right? But when they got to Jedi and everything had progressed as far as it had, Jabba became a giant slug.
Right.
And the Hutts were then giant slugs. And to bring that scene back, and I made notes in my notes here about why I think that scene got put back in. It isn't so much about showing Jabba as it is about seeing that shot of Boba Fett at the end of the scene.
Right.
Because Boba Fett is so important to Han Solo's story in the next movie. And I think it got added back in primarily to make sure you got to see Boba Fett in the quote-unquote first film.
I think Jabba takes precedence on that one. I think they did that for Jabba.
I don't agree. Because if you're putting Jabba in for that, they turned him into a goofy cartoon character.
Well,
because Han passes behind him, and so they have to come up with a creative way to have Han walk behind Jabba the Hutt. So he steps on his tail. Are you kidding me? The most notorious gangster in the Outer Rim, you're going to walk on him? No way.
Yeah.
He'd have had your ass shot right there.
Yeah.
That's the Jabba we know from Jedi. But Jabba here, just a couple years before that, is cartoony, he stepped on my tail. Ooh, my goodness. No way.
I get your point, too, because, besides Boba, there's other main bounty hunters in that scene. If it was just about Jabba, it'd be Jabba and a couple of his henchmen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really do think it was just about trying to get those bounty hunters into the shot, and specifically that last shot of Boba Fett.
And we talked about this going into Phantom Menace. The special editions were, let's try to progress our CGI so we can make the prequels.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which you go back and you look at these special editions, you're like, oh.
Yeah, it was totally
it's a rough.
They were testing it out.
And to be clear, too, the special editions we watch now aren't the special editions we watched in 97.
No.
Because they went back and redid Jabba in that scene again.
Yep.
For the Blu-ray releases, and that's what we see now. And he looks better than he did in the original 97 version. But yeah, so there it is. We've progressed into a whole conversation about other things.
But hold on. But this is a big discussion about the original 3 films and how they changed, and how that there is a whole generation that doesn't even understand the whole Han shot first.
I don't.
But I'm saying...
Mikey and I talked about this earlier, because he was like, this is the myth of a generation,
Right.
Of our generation. And I said to him, you're not my generation.
Yep.
And I was just talking to Jar Jar back there about the fact that he's 17 years younger. He's definitely not my
No,
Jar.
absolutely, but that's what I'm...
So what is Star Wars? It's modern mythology.
Yes.
When you said that, I was like, yes, that's exactly
Now, when you talk about the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians and their mythologies and the way they talked about them, most of that was, stories told from generation to generation. And there was a translation factor as new generations of people took the storytelling and kind of added or embellished or, expanded that story itself. So when you read something like the Iliad or the Odyssey, right? What we read, Homer's version of that, is not necessarily the only version of that story.
Absolutely not.
It's just the version that he eventually wrote down after, how many centuries or decades of people talking about that story and telling that story from region to region to region. It's telephone, exactly.
Yeah.
So we all have our different perspectives on the trilogy, and this is the one we all call the Holy Trilogy, right? The original.
Yeah.
And I try to respect everybody's personal approach to where these movies come from. And I get really frustrated at people who complain that they want it to go back to something.
Oh, yeah, no.
And I'm like, but that's not how storytelling works.
No.
And yes, film is a different medium of storytelling, but it is still an art form. And as long as it is still under the control of people who can tweak it, like George Lucas could continue to tweak the story he was telling, I argue that an artist has the right to continue to refine and change stories to match the story they currently want to tell to whatever generation they're telling it.
Yeah, so but there's now 3 versions of it. There is the Han shot first, which is the original. Then there is the...
And I think that's the definition of what people are looking at when they're looking for the original version of that movie to come out, is the non-CGI enhanced Han shot first version.
The CGI, the first original set of CGI is then Han shot second. But the Disney Plus version...
That just came out.
They shot at the same time. We actually went and looked.
I couldn't pause it frame by frame on my.
We did it.
Computer.
We did it.
But I was like, damn, they look like it's indistinguishable now.
It is faster so than because before it's like a millisecond or two, right?
Same time. It was basically boom, same time.
Really?
Yeah. So there's now 3 versions of it, depending on.
And Greedo says McClunky now.
Yes.
Right before they shoot.
Yeah.
Which nobody knows what that means.
So what, like...
I will say that we talked about that. I pondered this question last week, but they brought the 20th Century Fox fanfare back into it.
Well, I mean, they own it now.
Yeah, exactly. But I was curious if they were doing it or not.
It was fun to see it.
It was.
But it was fun to see it play.
Did they actually ever remove it from
I don't think
the
so.
first 3 Star Wars? I don't think they did.
No.
I don't know.
No, because I rewatched the...
So they don't have it in any of the new movies they've been making, but I don't know that they removed it from the first 3 Star Wars movies.
I think I'm not sure about the first 3.
Or the first 6 Star Wars movies.
Well, Steve said from his Amazon it didn't have it. And for the he was on what, Revenge?
Yeah.
He said that didn't have it in it.
Now it's worth. We'll have to research it.
Depends on what medium format you watch it on.
But I mean, I find it fascinating though that there's this progression, especially in this one particular moment in the episode 4. This one particular moment. That is a talk among things, and I mean, I had arguments with kids. I call you kids, but you're kids because it's a different generation of what I saw. About the whole, no, he didn't. It's like.
Now here's something interesting. So I was 2 when Star Wars came out.
Yeah.
So obviously, I didn't watch it in theaters. Supposedly, I was in a theater when my parents went to see it, but I was 2. So there's no way, I don't remember that experience at all. That said, Dad watched it in the theaters in the initial run.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I started watching it on HBO a few years later, and then getting into Empire and Jedi, I started talking about watching A New Hope to my dad, who was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Star Wars: A New Hope." He's like, "What is that?" I said, "Star Wars, the movie."
Right.
A New Hope. I'm like 6 or 7 at this point. I'm like, "Star Wars: A New Hope." He's like, "What movie is that?" And because he watched it without that in the crawl.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because he only saw it once in the movie theater, but he watched it when it didn't have that in the crawl.
Yeah.
And he had no idea what I was talking about till I got him to sit down with me on one of the re-airings.
Yeah.
And we were watching. I said, "Look, see, it's episode 4, A New Hope." He goes, "This is the first movie. What is it?"
Yeah, that was always the thing, right?
You know?
Yep.
So, even my dad was confused by the changes that early on.
Oh, yeah.
But it happened, and it continues to happen with Star Wars. And I wonder, I greatly wonder if we will ever see those kinds of changes come to, these newer films or any of the films that were in the prequels.
Yeah.
Might there be changes there? And as far as I know, there were some changes. There were changes made to the prequels by the time they got to Blu-ray, including replacing Puppet Yoda from Episode 1 with Digital Yoda from Episode 2 and 3.
Well, and they went back and they changed Return of the Jedi to put in Hayden Christensen.
Yeah. But that...
Ghost.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. So, Star Wars: A New Hope. The one that started it all.
Yeah. Okay.
So now,
It took us 15 minutes to get to
15 minutes in to get into the actual review.
We are such geeks. I love it.
Okay. I love this crawl. It's about restoring freedom, and like civil war, and like it creates and paints a picture of a universe that none of us had seen before.
I don't read the crawls.
And Theresa doesn't read the crawls, but you got dyslexia, so I think that's part of your thing.
Yeah, I can't
like
read
that
the
angle,
crawls.
angled moving text going.
Yep.
Which is why I think to this day I still read them out loud.
David always read
when I watch the movie, because I always, anytime there's any sort of credit type things like that in a movie, I would read them out loud to Theresa growing up. And so even as an adult today, I'm sitting, I spent the last 3 days in an RV, 4 days in an RV here in Texas alone watching movies. And so even sitting in my RV, I'm watching Star Wars and I'm like, it's a period of civil war. I'm like reading this thing out loud. I got about halfway through the scroll. I was like, why am I reading this out loud to myself?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's because of years and years of reading it for me. So I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you.
So, but that's probably part of why I love the crawl. It's why I like being a voiceover artist and an announcer.
Yeah, because you had to do it for me.
I did it for years growing up.
Yeah.
Anytime there was like mountains of text on screen, I had to read it out.
Yeah, if it's more than like one line.
More than a line. If it's more than a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
Yeah, more than that, and I'm done. I can't do it. Can't read it.
One of the things that Star Wars did so incredibly well, and right off the bat, is establishing scale. Right?
The ships. Yep.
The camera tilting down from the universe, right? And the text disappearing and vanishing into the distance, into the void, right? And then it comes down, and you're just immediately racked with a large ship followed by a larger ship over a planet that's so big in scope, you only see a sliver of it at the bottom of the screen, right? That is what caught people's attention.
Within like 3 seconds.
Right off the bat. And it's lasers and it's sound, it's loud, and it's in your face. Like just from the fanfare right into this moment where the Tantive 4 is being chased by the Star Destroyer. It's just a nonstop assault on your senses that establishes size. This is a big story we're telling. Whether it's actually a big story or not is arguable, but it's a big universe, right? It's a galaxy far, far away, which makes it feel big right from the first piece of text, right? Then you see the universe, then you see these giant ships over this planet that, you don't see the entirety of. And that's one of my pet peeves between the original Star Wars and how it treated planets in the distance versus the prequel trilogy.
You got none of that.
Where you see entire
planets
in view, as opposed to we're in orbit and you only see a sliver,
yeah.
Right? The difference between Star Trek's orbiting around planets versus the initial Star Wars, where the planet is so massive you can't get all of it, which then puts the Death Star later in perspective because you can see the entire orb of the Death Star, which, while being massive, is not as massive as the planets. Just little things that I noticed.
No, it's good.
But I love the way scale is played with in this movie.
Definitely.
Constantly.
Oh yeah.
Constantly. Including wide shots. So we'll get to R2 and 3PO. They get ejected out on the pod and they land on Tatooine. And they go from close-ups where they're talking to these wide shots.
Yeah.
Right? Where they're just little tiny figures in the desert. Right? Which also establishes this giant void of sand. Right? So they constantly played with your perspective of stuff to establish that everybody is small in the grand scale of things.
Look at Jawas in a sandcrawler.
Right?
Exactly.
The tiniest creatures drive the biggest vehicle. I mean, it's fascinating.
It just makes me think of the terrains. All the terrains are extremes of what they are, Complete desert, complete.
Well, and that gets back to one of the things we talked about in one of the previous podcasts is why is every planet one climate?
Right.
Because in Star Wars, everything is one extreme or the other. That's a very good answer, actually. Thanks, Jar Jar. So the Tantive 4 being sucked into the bay of the Star Destroyer, again, playing with that sense of scale and stuff. You actually, Star Destroyers are not to be messed with. Right?
Absolutely.
I love that. I love the way that's all played with, all through there.
I mean, one of my first memories is just the sound, the sound engineering is just those low frequencies hums, like when you're in the Death Star or near a big ship, like they immerse you, and they did it well with Last Jedi. And I mean, even Force Awakens, like just the way they play with sound also just gives it that extra little dash of sparkle.
Well, the funny thing is, you think it's just one little tiny spaceship. But then you go inside, and then they're actually looking for the princess. They're looking for, clearly the Tantive 4 is a large ship.
Right?
They're searching for somebody. So you just guess that, this Star Destroyer must be a full, huge, massive aircraft carrier of a ship.
Yep. Giant ship in space. Vader's entrance. Right? First you get the troopers, which are kind of cool.
Yep.
Okay, this is interesting. Those are spacesuits. Right? Black and white, look kind of like skeletons, but, it's cool.
Wait.
I always thought the back said oil, by the way. When I was a kid. The little design on the back.
Yeah.
I always thought it said oil. I don't know why, but that,
Well, when we talk about Vader's entrance, I assume you guys just did podcast to Rogue One.
We didn't do Rogue One, no.
No.
Oh, just
Rogue One's not part of this review.
It's just the Skywalker.
It's just the Skywalker stuff.
Yeah.
Vader's entrance here is the iconic initial introduction of Vader to the world. And what I wrote in my notes and what I find truly fascinating about it is not a word is spoken. When he first walks in,
looks around, wheezes a little bit,
Steps on a body,
and keeps on moving.
Yep.
Right? It's like the mystery of that is awesome.
And again, the contrast, right? The whole ship's white, the stormtroopers are white. This one big, huge,
all black
figure comes just looking around.
The color scheme of this entire movie is phenomenal because it is mostly whites and blacks, dark versus evil,
and browns.
Yeah,
or
dark
dark
versus
and evil,
light.
light. Yeah, and you have the little
Earth versus industrial.
Yep.
Gray and browns, black and whites.
But you have very few colors in between. And that was always one of my most fascinating things as a kid going, there's no color in this.
Most of the colors in between come on the droids.
Yeah, exactly. Some of the accent lighting a little bit, but as far as creatures go, it's your Tatooine, you got your earth tones and all that stuff, but everything else is black and white. Like, this is absolutely gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely symbolic, and you know what it is completely from the get-go.
And then again, it's playing with extremes, right? You're in space, you have like lightsabers, you have, pistols, and then you're in Yoda Swamp, and then all of a sudden, it's dark and grimy. Again, just playing with two extremes and very different light.
Yeah, the original trilogy did a very good job of playing with settings being characters.
Yes.
And telling the emotional undercurrent of the story. And that's an art form in filmmaking that I think has been lost and is being rediscovered again recently. And I think a lot of the kind of neon noir people are helping kind of reestablish that in filmmaking. And it's an exciting time, actually, if you're into film and how film tells stories and visually. It's an exciting time to be watching movies again. There's a lot of that sort of stuff in the Joker movie.
Yeah.
Whether you like the Joker movie or not, the cinematography in it is fantastic.
Just thinking about the beginning of New Hope, I do just realize, like you said, not only did Vader not have many lines, all the beginning is very small, minimal dialogue.
It's true.
The whole thing, not just Vader, and that's what I caught myself when I was watching with, anytime I watch with a new person, I try to introduce them. They're like, nothing's happening. I'm like, watch, just watch, and I realized that's a huge part of the beginning of New Hope.
And it's not normal in a lot of films in the since then.
No.
People talk. A lot of exposition. Tell us what's going on. Star Wars makes you watch. You have to watch it.
You have to, and it makes you invest, and then.
Did anybody else, how did 3PO not see Leia, giving the handoff to R2? He's staring right at her. He doesn't know what the princess looks like on the princess's ship. Seems a little odd.
It's weird, because he says this later with Luke. He's like, oh, we were in some counselor ship. He clearly has no idea or doesn't pay attention. Who knows? But it's always a weird...
3PO is very aloof, period. Yeah. I mean, he is the most unobservational droid there probably is.
It is the opposite to R2,
R2 who's constantly absorbing everything around.
And catches everything in every small little detail.
Another duality right there.
Well, and let's just get into R2 and C-3PO's relationship. I mean, this is what we all know it about. It's the comedic Abbott and Costello, right? The sarcastic little short guy and the dim-witted,
tall, skinny guy.
Yeah. And we talked about this in the prior, but it's you don't get you don't get a lot of that in the prequels. You get snippets of it at the very end of Attack.
Well, they're not even together.
No, not until the very end of Attack of Clones, and then Revenge is not about them at all. So they're barely in it.
That's where I think it did kind of lose some steam for me, is that in New Hope, all I want to know is what's going to happen with these two droids, and
they are our window into the universe.
Yes.
And now that I guess it's an introduction to the universe now we're introduced, so we use different mediums to do that. But
because really everybody talks about how we follow Luke on his journey in this movie,
following R2,
but really we follow 3PO and R2 because they're the first characters that we hitch a ride with, really. Yep. Right? When they escape the Tantive in the escape pod, we're on the ride with them at that point. And really, we follow them all the way to the end when they get all gleamy and shiny.
And,
You know,
maybe that's, I don't know how far ahead we want to get, but, maybe... Well, in the new trailer, I get never mind.
No, don't go there.
I know. I just realized.
Right here.
we don't talk about the new trailer.
No, I know. Well, even overall, this isn't the time and place.
Thank you.
So the escape pod leaves. No life signs on board. Just let it go. This is malfunction. Hello.
I don't think. Yeah.
Pop it and be safe.
Yeah,
You're chasing down something. Right?
I don't think a general out of his caliber would ever not
it's very convenient for the storytelling. Vader's interrogating Leia, and I find the whole sequence distracting and weird because all I can think during the whole time is boy, Vader needs a polish. Because he looks rough, man. And granted, this is the very first time anybody saw him, so I remember being a kid. Vader was just terrifying. But now, after hours of Vader available to us in all the different forms, all I can think of when I see him show up in A New Hope is, boy, he really needs a polish, because he doesn't look this crappy anywhere else in the movies.
Funny.
He's dingy and rough looking, And if you're watching them as a kid today would, watching 1, 2, 3, and then 4, it's he goes from being super polished at the end of Sith. It's whoa, what did the last 20 years do to you? Doesn't the Empire have a buff and wax protocol for your armor?
I do love the subtle changes in Vader's outfit in each episode.
There are changes.
Changes between the chain across the neck, the crotch plate. I don't even know what you want to call that little thing. And then the main thing, the red eyes.
Yeah.
Which go away completely in Empire and Return.
I don't think they go away so much as I think just the contrast and the lighting changes.
Maybe.
I think it's always just been
to make it more mysterious where you don't see him. But the red eyes were always part of Vader's deal, the red lenses.
Yep.
Were we talking costume?
Yeah.
So costume, right? So my favorite part of New Hope is seeing the admirals, right? And the guys on the destroyer ship. Their medals are buttons. They're buttons.
The blue and red buttons.
The blue and red buttons that you can find on Vader's outfit and on the consoles are the same things that they use for the medals on their uniforms. Exact same things. And that's all I could stare at. And I just kept going, oh my God, it's buttons. They just put buttons.
I should mention to people listening to this podcast, we four here, and really the entire group of us that are on this podcast are all filmmakers.
All filmmakers, so
there is a certain perspective you're going to get when you listen to our reviews of these films that are filmmakers discussing the film and kind of the...
Because we do camera, we do set design.
We do camera, we do set design, production design, art direction,
and all that sort of stuff.
I'm a director and a producer. Teresa's a director and a producer. Mike's a cameraman. Julian's a cameraman.
So we're going to go into this stuff in a completely different aspect than I think what normal, everyday Star Wars fans will probably do.
That said, I also think James Earl Jones was an inspired choice for the voice for Vader.
Absolutely.
And James Earl Jones doing a British accent.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way.
Because, all the Brits are evil.
That's what I came to learn after watching these movies. Except Rey.
In the desert, R2 is really sure of himself, and I keep asking, and I asked it as a kid, why won't R2 tell 3PO what's up? Right? Right from the start. Hey, Leia gave me something. I gotta go find this old dude out here in the desert and give him this thing she gave me.
He wouldn't have gone along with it.
Why wouldn't he tell 3PO?
He wouldn't have gone along with it. He already walked away.
Because 3PO talks too much. Here's my question, though, and this is now because we're watching it in order, right? So where are those jetpacks?
I've asked that. Where's R2's
Why
jetpack?
slowly roll along in sand when he could just use his jetpack and fly?
The fuel never got,
What?
got replaced.
What's wrong?
Somewhere in 20 years, they became inoperable.
They became inoperable.
Yeah.
We're getting along. We should,
Jawas are weird. That's my next note.
They're creepy. They're creepy kids.
I love Jawas personally. I think they're fascinating creatures. My text message is Houdini.
One of my favorite cosplays was it Comic-Con this year? Maybe Comic-Con. Was it WonderCon? There was a group of kids
dressed as Jawas.
Dressed as Jawas.
So
it was like 6 of them, all different heights. It was awesome. It was
1981. I'm 6 years old in Ohio, and we're trick or treating, and one of the kids on our block was dressed as a Jawa. His parents had made him the tunic, they made him the cloak, and they painted his face all black, and they created a yellow Christmas light eye visor thing that he
that's
put
amazing.
over his forehead to have the 2 yellow eyes.
Nice.
And it just blew my mind.
Yeah, I bet.
It was a little 6-year-old. And my friend had the coolest outfit anywhere, But yeah, I mean, really, Halloween is most kids' first introduction to cosplay, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And again, they're introduced with no dialogue. They just come in, they set up shop, they set up a little swap meet,
Yeah, a little swap meet.
They steal
It's
some.
the jankiest group of droids, that they're selling too. It's like, what's that weird little spider droid?
They are full like used car salesmen.
Traveling used car salesman, door-to-door used car salesman.
Yeah.
And they try to pawn off an RT unit with a bad motivator.
Like trying to sell the whole set of encyclopedias without like a letter.
So obviously we're all watching special edition versions. Dewbacks. I love the dewbacks. I was a big fan of the dewback edition to the Tatooine landscape.
I said that how many years though? Like I had to say it.
Going through my notes, 3PO is so negative. Like, just
3PO is
constantly
always negative. Oh my gosh, he is the most negative
He's
person.
that friend.
Yeah, he's that friend. He is that friend.
3PO is that friend. He's the friend who's going to tell you everything's going to hell, even when the sun's bright and shining, and you just won the lottery. He's like, yeah, but everybody's going to be asking you for loans, and no, you won't be able to trust anybody.
And then you're going to have to buy this house and that house, and all of a sudden you've got no money left.
He's like, it's a proven statistic that people who win the lottery are more unhappy than people who don't.
to one.
That's 3PO.
That is 3PO.
He's the Eeyore of the Star Wars universe.
It's not a half empty. It's the glass is empty. It's
just the glass is shattered, and you stepped on the shards. He's that guy.
That is totally 3PO right there.
What is it? 3,000 to 1. There's always the odds.
One of the odds, always. Yeah.
To one.
A little thing I noticed: Owen never asks the droids for their names.
Okay, so I had a huge problem with this. I had a massive problem. I immediately turned to go, excuse me. Excuse me. How do you not know that that's 3PO? 3PO says his name. He says his name.
When?
Yeah,
he
right
says
at the beginning.
When he's being bought. When he's being bought, I am C-3PO, human cyborg relations.
Oh, yeah. He says his own name.
Yeah, but I'm so in my... How
do you not know C-3PO?
Do you not know C-3PO when C-3PO was your droid for God knows how many years at that point?
Well, this goes on later with Obi and R2.
How does Obi-Wan and R2?
That's the one, yeah.
But then again, right, then we're talking about, again, how Star Wars has changed with what it's got to work with.
Yeah, but the issue here, though, is, again, the storytelling that George Lucas is doing, he forced R2 and 3PO into the prequels.
Yeah.
Where they maybe didn't really belong.
Yes.
Because he had set up a construct for himself that they were, the goofy two that you follow through all these stories. And they'll be the only ones that are in the entire set of stories.
That's funny.
It was problematic in the prequels because there's all these characters that are established as not knowing them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you get to these movies now, and I wonder what little kids watching today, kids today are really sharp.
Oh, yeah.
Do they watch it and go, why doesn't Owen recognize 3PO?
Yeah.
Right away. That's what I thought.
Yeah, he should know. He certainly recognizes Ben Kenobi.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Obi-Wan
so
reference.
Again, he recognizes the name Ben Kenobi.
Yeah, but wouldn't 3PO suddenly showing up on a Jawa collar raise a red flag? Since the last time he left, he just kind of scooted off with Anakin.
I don't remember.
He just kind of vanished with Anakin.
And he went back with them.
He vanished with Anakin, and then a few months later, a couple years later, whatever, the Clone Wars have raged on, and Obi-Wan shows up with a baby and says, you need to take care of this because the universe is in trouble and Anakin's responsible. Wouldn't 3PO and R2-D2, who was around during that whole time too?
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't he recognize both of them and be like, why are these two fucking droids here again?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, he would have just had a heart attack.
Like, Luke, go inside.
Well, and they try to take care of that loophole at the very end of Revenge of the Sith with wiping C-3PO.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, good.
It takes care of 3PO, but it doesn't take care of everybody else.
Exactly. I'm like, I give you guys credit for doing that.
Yeah.
But still, it's like...
But, in the context of Star Wars, a droid's a droid. To us, yeah, it's C-3PO and,
Well, people say that, but a droid's not really the case.
how many...
They're all unique, though. So, like, even let's go with the R2-D2.
That's where I'm...
With those droids, right? Like, they are all very uniquely done different. You don't see a very exact same looking R2-D2 with a different name. Now, the human cyborg relations droids, C-3PO, yes, they are very similar, but if you actually see any of them, you put them side by side, they are actually different. To a point, They
all have their own personalities.
They all have their own
R2 is
voice.
by far the most personality-filled droid that you see throughout the entire series.
Till BB-8.
Yes and no.
BB-8 gives you a fiery thumbs up.
I love that. I cracked up so hard in that. I do. But at the same time, like, we knew it from R2. We knew the sarcasm of R2. And
with whistles, simple motions. With BB-8, we get it because he has a much more range of motion and, a lot more...
I don't know, you can do a lot from a ball.
BB-8 can give you the tilt of a head. Now, the tilt of a head in an action of emotion, a tilt of the head can show a lot.
Yeah.
Puppet head tilt.
From a character, puppet head tilt, yeah. From a character performance standpoint, BB-8 is the next logical progression from R2.
We're still only 15 minutes into the movie, though.
Yeah, I know.
We'll get there.
This is why
these episodes go 2 hours.
These episodes
So R2 starts playing Leia's message.
Well, before we get there,
just a portion of it.
Before we get there,
I do like how he was introduced because he looked like just a taller Jawa when he was first introduced, and the wizards come in and literally had the pointy hat.
Oh, we're not at that point yet.
Oh, we already.
No,
yeah, you're right. We haven't even.
We have not even gotten to that point yet.
When R2 starts playing the message and. They're trying to figure out what it's all about. I love how R2's just playing dumb the whole freaking time.
What do you mean, what message?
The one you playing in your Westinians. It's like that interaction between 3PO and R2, I think, is what endeared those two characters.
I love how
gave him a smack.
Luke
It
how
was
to do
hilarious.
something and, oh no, it's broken. What? You told me that would fix it.
Yeah. Take the restraining bolt off.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you're too little to run away. Out it goes. Where'd it go? Tell him to play back the message. What message? The one you've been playing. It's classic comedy, that bit right there. It is absolute classic comedy. And it's played so well.
I mean, so that got me thinking, is that George, writing? Like, is that...
Yeah, George wrote that movie.
That, like, and... I mean, those...
He has moments.
Yeah.
He has moments. But, he'd been working on that first Star Wars script for a long time. He originally wrote the first treatment for Star Wars around the time he made THX 1138, and that bombed, and they went through all the things at American Zoetrope that they went through. Coppola went off to make The Godfather to get them all out of the debt that Lucas had put the whole group in, and Lucas said, I want to make this Star Wars thing as my next movie. And Coppola said, why not do something closer to home? The last time you tried this didn't work out so well for any of us. And it convinced him to write American Graffiti. And then it was the success of American Graffiti that allowed him to then revisit Star Wars and make Star Wars.
Right.
But George Lucas was really focused on Star Wars for many years. So I think he was able to refine that storytelling a little bit more than he did on later things where he was maybe not spending as much time trying to make that work.
Yeah.
I'll move forward through this a little bit.
Let's jump.
I want a land speeder.
Land speeders are awesome.
It's when everyone's like, okay, cool, it's a ship in space. I'll never get that. But when you saw a land speeder, something hovering over land, you're like, I want this.
So they have like the kid version of the
they have that
speeder,
now.
which I almost bought. Like I was so close. Like all Sean had to do was say yes, mommy.
Oh yeah, when we saw them at Comic-Con.
So would have bought it. You want that? I mean, that'd be cool. I'm like, oh, come on. All you have to do is just say yes. Just say yes. Yes, mommy, I want that.
Why is Aunt Beru's ADR so bad?
There's a lot of this movie that the ADR is...
Well, if you go back and watch... I did this a number of years back because sound has been kind of a big issue for me for the last few years, and I've been really analyzing it and kind of watching the history of sound over time. Go back and watch the original Superman, and you will be blown away at how bad the ADR is.
Oh, God, no, that ADR is insane.
It's terrible.
No, it's absolutely horrendous.
But people were way more forgiving of bad ADR back then, I think.
I don't know if people actually fully just noticed and looked for those things.
I don't know if it was common knowledge that people went back and literally recorded scene after scene after scene back in the studio.
Yeah.
And I don't think it was just common knowledge.
Yeah.
Although, again, we're filmmakers, so we know these things.
We do catch it.
Well, even as a kid, her voice always stood out to me as not being the same as everybody else's.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because, like, when they're sitting around drinking the blue milk, Luke and Owen both have a tremendous amount of, like, reverb from the room, and Beru has none.
Yeah, she's very dull in the sound, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a dullness to it.
There's a couple scenes later on where I think it's with Leia and Tarkin.
Oh, Leia especially.
Where Leia, you can clearly tell, is in studio recording, and then there's ADR, like, because they go back from sentence to sentence.
It has a lot to do with Leia. It has a lot to do if it's shot, if she's talking with the camera behind her or the camera facing her face. So when the camera's facing her face, it is a more live sound.
Yeah.
When it is her over the shoulder shot, it's ADR every time.
Well, and that oftentimes is a sign of a filmmaker trying to adjust the storytelling in post.
Yes.
By adding in lines of dialogue.
Got it.
Via ADR when you don't see somebody's face.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that with scenes with Vader.
Yeah.
There's a scene with Vader and Tarkin.
Oh, yeah.
In the council room where Vader said something, Tarkin responds back, and it looks like Vader's
hands
talking.
are doing this, but Vader's not saying anything, but his hands are doing all sorts of stuff. Yeah,
Well,
I saw that too.
It's like the great thing with like Spider-Man and Deadpool, right? you could rewrite the whole movie.
Oh yeah.
I do want to say I love the home on Tatooine. I love that it's mostly underground. That it's got that central courtyard deal, so like all the tunnels is kind of retract back into this center area. And I don't know if you know this, but that location still exists to this day in Tunisia. You can visit it.
Yep.
The family that lives in it opens it up every day to tourists to come in, take photos, and they sell trinkets.
That's cool.
And if you watch Ewan McGregor's motorcycle documentary, A Long Way Down,
yes,
he and his buddy Charlie Borman actually drove their motorcycles through Tunisia and visited the Tatooine set on the motorcycles and surprised people. They just walked in, hey, fuck, Obi-Wan's here. Right? Like, how cool would that be? But yeah, so, if you ever find yourself in Tunisia, be sure to check it out. Luke is youthful and reckless, like, throughout this entire movie, right? Like, and I think that's the thing that I like about Luke as opposed to young Anakin that we got in episode 1. Luke has youthful exuberance without having to be a child, right? Yeah. He's got innocence, he's got naivete, he's got enthusiasm, but he doesn't have to be 8, right? And I think, but he still appeals to children. Children love Luke Skywalker, right? I think Lucas did himself a disservice by forgetting that Luke could be childlike in that beginning, and Anakin could have been childlike and older, and still appealed to the kids that Lucas was trying to appeal to by putting an 8-year-old in that role. And as I discovered watching episode 1 with Theresa's kid, 9-year-olds don't care that he's 8 or 9 years old, really, for the most part. They just don't care.
No.
Right? They want a character they can relate to on the energy and the excitement and the enthusiasm. And I think Luke does that without having to be a child. And I think that's part of what makes this movie work.
And then all of a sudden to, be thrown into tragedy and lose your freaking aunts and uncles.
Yeah, and boy, is that a dark scene.
Yeah, like how do you go?
Dude, they show the burnt body.
Yeah, how do you go from
Dude.
We were talking about this a little earlier. Like, so they showed the burnt bodies. The cantina scene, you actually have a bloody arm.
Bloody arm in the cantina.
It's a different style.
Tossing dead Jawas onto a burning fire pit.
Yeah.
Yep. Right? It's a definitely different storytelling time in 1977, right? And this is ostensibly still a children's film.
Yeah, he's always said that.
It's, but it was darker. But this is one of those interesting things too about storytellers and time. Spielberg revisited E.T. and took the guns out of the hands of the federal agents on one of the video releases.
Yeah, because why would federal agents
why would federal agents be chasing children with guns? And he eventually went back and put them back. He's like, that was a mistake. But once these filmmakers start having children of their own opinions of what they thought was appropriate to show to kids start to change. But in all the changes that Star Wars has seen in post-production, these things have never changed.
No.
A bloody arm severed from its body in the cantina. Burning cadavers. I mean, burnt to a crisp. And
in agony.
Yeah, obviously we're burning and came out of the house and collapsed and then just finished burning on the cabinet,
it was like a painful, awful death.
You could tell it was not a pleasant way to go, And
that shot of Luke of how he's taking it, it's it's not like he's not sobbing, he's not he's so at a loss,
So how do you decide what is over the top. I mean, like, let's talk about, for example, like the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. Okay, so like they changed, how many years ago did they change it that the pirate men were chasing the women for women?
It was about 10 years ago.
And then all of a sudden they changed it. They're chasing for food or gold and stuff. The women just happen to be carrying those things. Yet they left the Red Winch and Buy a Bride up until, what, a year ago?
Mm-hmm.
So where's the line? To me, those were two of the same things. Chasing after the women for that or buying a bride is two of the same things. So where's the line that one is okay and one's worse than the other? So the same thing with this sort of stuff. So how do you go from it's still okay to see the bloody arm and the burnt to the crisp bodies and stuff, yet they'll change some other, like he can't decide who shot first, Han or Guido. So I mean, like,
yeah, Han or Guido, like, who cares?
Who cares? So where in this, like, I'm that's my curiosity about the changes that happen and those sorts of things is, where's the line?
I mean, those scenes,
where is the line actually decided that somebody just goes, okay, well,
those scenes really make the movie though. Like it makes it serious. All of a sudden it's like,
yeah, but Han shooting first really sets his character in motion.
I mean,
as the scoundrel, as opposed to being.
Well, for me, growing up without that,
somebody who was justified in doing what he's doing.
I mean, I still see Han as Han. I grew up with him shooting second. And it hasn't changed. Like, he's still that little pirate that he is to me.
Well, the point of him shooting first in the originals, for at least for me, gave you the initial thought of Han that he's dangerous, and he wasn't going to do what is good for the rebels and everything else. He was only going to do what was good for him and what was going to benefit him. And he wasn't a good guy necessarily.
And again, I didn't.
So him shooting first was to help set the.
Well, and that sequence happens when Luke and Obi-Wan aren't in the cantina.
Yeah.
And so now, as a viewer, you understand
who he is.
They're heading off with a very dangerous man.
Yeah.
As opposed to now, or in the last 20 years during the special editions, they're heading off with a guy who, hey, if he has to defend himself, he'll put a guy down, if somebody shoots at him.
And maybe that was the point of,
it softens the character and takes away, and you don't know this because you never grew up with it, but it takes away some of the impact of who Han Solo is at the beginning of his
instead
story.
of the shot, I got it through, his distraction, his whole reaching for the wall and, unbuckling his gun holster. Like that right there gave that.
Well, that shows that he's smart. He knows he's in danger. Right.
But to me, that was my him shooting first,
Yeah, but it really doesn't have the same emotional impact. It just doesn't.
Again, I wouldn't know. That's not my.
Yeah, I know, but I do. Because I've been there. And most of us who've seen both versions of the movies through the course of our lives are all in agreement. Han should shoot first.
But then you have a whole new set of fans that, again, don't know what they're missing, right? So they
don't know what they're missing. So to them, it's natural and it's normal and it is what it is.
And then that's where the argument.
And again, this is the telephone conversation we had at the beginning. It's going to continue to change over time. But that's one of those changes that those of us who remember the original don't understand why that change was made.
And we're not saying that your opinion and your thought process of what you experience is wrong.
Yeah.
Not at all. Because what you experienced and how you interpreted what was given to you
it's completely valid for you.
Completely valid and completely understandable.
But for those of us who remember the way it was,
it's a
perfect scene.
Yeah, I understand the question, why change it?
And as a storyteller,
why change it?
Jar Jar, like
Jar Jar.
As a fellow storyteller, I would hope you would recognize how perfect that scene was to begin with. Right? by establishing Han Solo as a dangerous person. Not lovable, not somebody who's just gonna like stand up when he's in
stuff.
You know, it's like he's smart and he's ruthless and he's willing to do what he's got to do. You know, he doesn't need to be shot at to shoot another guy.
Yeah.
Right? That's a completely different kind of person from somebody who shoots in response to somebody shooting at him.
So with the way we got it is you got a totally bigger character arc with Han, with him shooting first. So with him shooting first, you watch him go from this hard knock, you know, I'm gonna do it before someone gets me attitude to him actually caring about things and caring about people and wanting to do what's right and not necessarily do what's best to keep him alive. So there's a whole you got an arc, but our arc was a totally different kind of arc.
You know, it's funny. It makes me think about like how he walked away from the table. Like the table doesn't match like the person who would have shot second. The way he walked and the way he interacted with the
and that's just it. He's got a swagger when he walked away.
So
chucks some change to the bartender. Like
I have always noticed that there was a difference between the guy who was sitting down and the guy that was walking away. You know?
Yep.
Yeah.
So maybe
and now with the new one. It is much more of a, especially with Greedo saying whatever he says. It reminds me of an old McClunky. That it is a Western draw.
Yes.
It is the exact same time, and whoever Han had a better shot.
Yeah.
That's all that is.
Yeah.
And I don't mind. I didn't mind the idea of adding in Greedo's blaster going off. And missing Han.
Yeah.
So wait. So actually,
that would have totally made sense to me.
I've never seen it.
Greedo's gun never went off originally.
Really?
Yeah.
So I always thought it was like he shot first, then Greedo, then he shoots again to actually kill.
No. Han shot first and killed.
Yeah, Han shot first and killed him. If you want, go back and play it frame by frame, you will see that they digitally move Han's upper body out.
It's so weird and obvious and ugly.
It's so
disgusting.
It's so poorly done because it's not the way the scene's supposed to.
Remind me of like a freaking Terminator 1.
You know, and I used to defend it. I'm like, well, I get it, you know, whatever. But this is, as a storyteller, it is incredibly disappointing to me that this absolutely perfect moment of character development, of character establishment for this character
that's the
was
thing
destroyed.
Too, it's the establishment. This is when this whole table conversation, this is us meeting Han. This is us getting to know Han Solo.
And again, no introduction.
And that first few minutes, that's what you're going to get of what this character is supposed to be like. And him shooting first and just killing was a badass move. You're like, oh shit, okay, this is the badass of the group. You know, like this is the guy who's just going to get shit done. Great. You know,
and
like
maybe if shit goes the wrong way,
just run and go.
He might kill the guys we're following along.
Well, now that I'm already looking at it, you got the young naive kid, you know, you got the older badass brother, and then you got the wise Jedi dad, you know.
Yeah.
And then
it establishes this trio of personality in a way that's no longer there. He's still a badass. He's still a great character, but something's been taken away.
Yep.
Now, Solo, to its credit, brought that idea back by having him shoot first at the end, killing his friend, because it's what was right for Han at that moment.
Yes.
Not because he had, you know, it doesn't matter. And his friend, to his credit, is like, you're learning, right? Because that's who they are.
I actually got excited when I saw that in theater. I actually kind of yelped out a little bit.
Because it was meaningful. Yeah. Like there was a meaning behind it.
And that's what Solo was supposed to do, is show you how he gets to being the guy who shoots first. And you see who he is. So when you see him shoot first in the cantina, it's like, yeah, this is the dude that we know, you know, like. So it's I
do like Chewie's and Han's like introduction to the movie. Nothing special. They just like You know, Obi's
They have
talking to him.
experience.
They come in you
They
looking
got
for a
their
ride.
thing,
You looking
you know,
for a ride.
yeah.
No guns blazing. The guns blazing comes afterwards with that shot. But it's so nonchalant. Oh, hey, I'm in this too.
Yeah.
End up to be a huge
And the way Han plays it cool when Obi-Wan's like, we need to avoid Imperial. Like,
well, that's the trick.
That's the trick, isn't it? You know, like he's so business matter of fact, you know, and again, it's part of establishing, it's this perfect establishment of character in that moment. You get so much of who Han Solo is.
And then right afterwards,
one scene.
Right afterwards, 10,000 credits. Oh boy, you know, he's all excited.
Yeah,
this is really
good. There's two of them. He's just with his dog. He's like, you know, like we're going to be able to buy a new skirt.
I'm into that one.
Yeah, I mean, there's the long tangent on who shot first, but it's an important piece. Again, that there's no way to review Star Wars as just a movie anymore.
No,
because it is the nexus of.
We're talking about Star Wars theory now. Like we're talking about like.
Yeah, but let's be honest. If you're getting into this kind of any sort of Star Wars conversation with any other fans and friends of yours, do they not turn into this long discussion about theory and everybody's thought process about where this or that goes? I mean, it is never a simple discussion. I mean, and we are now episode 4 into this, and we can't seem to do a podcast about one of these films without going 2.5 fucking hours.
Without going longer than the film.
Yeah, I mean, Rian Johnson, love him or hate him, one of the things he continually says, if you read his tweets, because, you know, people give him so much grief, but one of the things he's always saying is like, hey, disagreeing about Star Wars is one of the fundamental joys of being a fan of Star Wars.
Absolutely.
We all have our take, we all have our opinions, and we constantly bicker and argue with one another about it. It's what he's done since he was a kid. It's what I've done since I was a kid. I've been a huge Obi-Wan fan my whole life, right? Obi-Wan's been my favorite character for as long as I can remember. I loved him more than I loved Luke. I loved him more than I loved Vader. And it continued through the prequels, and I'm super stoked that we're getting a Disney Plus series. But that's not the case for other people. There are other people who worship the altar of Luke Skywalker, and they're the people who hate Last Jedi the most. You know, and it's like we all have the thing that we latch on the most. So you know, look at Theresa and me, like I carry a Boba Fett backpack around, you know. Teresa's got a Darth Vader backpack, you know. Her ex-husband's got a Rebel pilot backpack. We have the 3 different things that we like to talk about. And I don't even like Boba Fett. I just think he looks cool, right? You know, it's like he's a chump, but he wears cool armor. So I liked his backpack, you know. It's like
it's got pockets.
You know, I liked his wallet, you know. Like those are the things I carried around because I like the design, you know. He's a dumbass, but, you know, that's fine. The Mandalorian is making up for it. But
I love Darth Vader and I love Obi-Wan. Like, I love both.
And it is what Star Wars is, you know. You latch onto the things that you love. You defend them. You argue about them. You come at them from your own perspectives. This is what I love how, for most of my life, discussions like this have been a regular thing, right?
And that was, I mean, that's why, I mean, being a fan that understands that aspect of it, being able to see Force Awakens.
Am I good?
Yeah. Being able to see Force Awakens, you know, it was like, I mean, like, all right, they're going to take everything I already know about Star Wars, and then they're just going to give me a little bit more. And I got so excited, and I just couldn't believe Force Awakens. I mean, it didn't help that I was but, I mean, it was just, I couldn't believe.
Well, here's the thing for me is, like, we spent the last 3 episodes of this podcast reviewing at least 2 of the films that pretty much universally appear at the bottom of everybody's Star Wars lists, right? And we loved it, right? Even terrible Star Wars is great Star Wars.
Yes.
right? And that's our perspective. So let's get back to talking about the movie.
Just real fast, Jules, so you get to watch the new movie with us.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
So, we've got our tickets for December 19th. We will be podcasting that night. So Alec Guinness as Obi-Wan Kenobi in this is so fantastic.
Yeah, so good.
He's gentle, he's kind, he's wise.
He's witty.
He's witty, right? And he's got a real subtle, but you can see it, sense of humor to him too, right? Like, right from the moment he looks up at R2 and goes, "Hello there," right? You're just like, oh, this is like my friendly older uncle, you know? Like, I just want to hang out with this dude.
Transition from Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan to Alec Guinness's Obi-Wan is a pretty good transition.
Yeah.
I personally think so. Like, I can see where Ewan's Obi-Wan becomes Alec's Obi-Wan.
Absolutely. Especially when you get to
totally see where it happens. Especially when you get to Revenge of the Sith, where Ewan's fully into his Obi-Wan mode, you can see good parts of that in New Hope's Obi-Wan.
I mean,
you can see it there.
So many different franchises where like they try that, you know, and
it
doesn't sell either one way or the other. Old being new or new being
even just looking at Alden Ehrenreich trying to play Han Solo.
Yeah,
it's not great. It's adequate.
He tried.
You know, he tried.
But it's not like, we still have trouble believing that's Solo. I mean, to be honest.
Yeah, it's hard to watch him playing Han Solo and go.
But Ewan and Alex is like, that's.
But yeah, Ewan McGregor from the start is just like, okay, well, he was really young in the first one. It's like, okay, you know, for whatever differences there are, there's so much age difference there. I get it.
But it made sense.
But over the course of 3 movies, you definitely saw Ewan McGregor figuring out how to tie that performance in, and he did a wonderful job. And really, for me, he's the best performance of the prequels.
I can't wait for the series.
Yeah, the series is awesome. I can't wait for it. I talk oftentimes about how thin I think the storytelling is in Star Wars: A New Hope. It's not, for all the reverence Star Wars fans place on this movie, there's surprisingly little story actually told and surprisingly little background actually told.
It's more of a series of events.
The closest bit of background we get to anything is this discussion between Luke and Obi-Wan at Obi-Wan's house, where he says, "I was once a Jedi Knight like your father." You know, it's like
so much history in that one line,
right? It's like, but there's really very little said. You know, he was. Your uncle thought you might run off with me on some damn fool crusade. Well, that one line just carries a lot of weight to it.
Just as your fathers did.
You know, like, well, what kind of crusade? What exactly does that mean? You know, like, what's a clone war? You know, like
Jedi Order, like
Jedis,
what?
You know,
Jedi Knights. Okay, well, the word knight gives you an idea.
Thousands of generations.
And the fact that he carries a sword of sorts tells you. There's gaps that are filled in by your imagination based on what you may or may not know about English lore, you know, European lore with knights and
mythology.
You know, and that kind of medieval mythology of what a knight was. Right?
Yeah, we go from droids to 1,000 generations of knights. You know, it's like how am I supposed to comprehend that? I'm just here to enjoy it, I guess. Like,
yeah, well, but I always say this. People's perception of New Hope as this giant tome of what the Star Wars universe is not true.
This is where I wish Jordan was around.
There's virtually nothing in this movie to tell you anything. Even the Force is vaguely explained.
Explained.
It's beautifully explained. But I think we get a much better, beautiful explanation of it from Luke in The Last Jedi.
Yes.
right?
True.
And it's visually more stunning than anything we got anywhere else, where the camera goes up and down.
They're telling me New Hope is just an episode in some Clone Wars like series.
Well, no. Okay, so this is where.
But again, remember, this is the movie that launched everybody's imagination, right?
But that's the key.
And now we've
That's
got
the beauty of it too. It didn't need to. It
imagination.
didn't.
But
need-
now we've got 40 years of people holding this movie in such high regard. But the reality is there's not a lot here. And I thought we'd be able to get through today's discussion in an hour, but we haven't because we're talking about everything from Solo to Rogue One to, like the entirety of Star Wars rides on the back of this movie.
Yes.
You can no longer talk about Star Wars A New Hope on its own.
Without branching to everything else.
Because
crazy.
its tendrils reach out to the entire Star Wars universe. And our perceptions, our memories of what this movie is, whether it's a special edition kid's memory or a Gen X kid's memory or even a baby boomer's memory of this movie, is affected by 40 years of Star Wars experiences beyond this film that can't help but affect how you perceive and remember this movie.
Right.
Right? Obi-Wan's the wise old mentor. He trained Luke. Here's my notes on him training Luke. The Force, simple explanation, mysterious and lacking in details of the magical part. He teaches him with the droid. Luke gets shot a dozen times or more, and then finally blocks like 4 blasts, right? Then they show up on the Death Star. Obi-Wan says, your path is not the same as mine, runs off to go do something. The next time Luke sees him, Obi-Wan gives into the Force, which, by the way, is incredibly cool if you watch the Clone Wars cartoons and watch the episodes where Yoda communes with Qui-Gon.
Oh, nice.
And it's the end of season 6.
Got it.
Go watch the end of season 6, Yoda's journey. It's like 3 episodes, and it like makes everything here in this moment fucking more fascinating.
Yeah.
But again, this is now affected in my perception of it by all these other things that I've seen and read and experienced. But Obi-Wan gives into the Force and vanishes, right? That's the last time Luke Skywalker saw Obi-Wan Kenobi in the flesh, which means his actual physical training with this man consisted of 1 dose of droid deflections. That's it.
That's it.
Right? And flash forward a little bit later, he's flying an X-Wing he's never flown in his life before, but he's the best bush pilot, whatever that means in the Outer Rim. Okay, fine. And he shot Womp Rants from his TC-16 back home. Suddenly he's blowing up a Death Star without his navigational computer to assist him because he's channeling the Force. Mary Sue, anybody?
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Ray gets a lot of grief from negative fandom.
It's insane.
And I don't like negative fandom, and this is part of why I'm bringing this up. I want to defend positivity in everything we do. Luke Skywalker is the Mary Sue of Mary Sues. Mm-hmm. When he's on the Millennium Falcon, and the alarms are going off, he's like, hey, what's that? And Han Solo is literally batting his hand away. And 30 minutes later, he's blowing up a Death Star. Like, it's like, okay, But we remember Luke Skywalker as being this character who's so in tune with the Force and so one with the Force, and Obi-Wan guided him, and Obi-Wan got him to deflect 3 blasters and then vanished. And then was like the crazy voice in Luke's head, like.
See, this is where I come in. So this is me, 13-year-old me going, I didn't care for Obi-Wan. I'm like, okay, so he's the mentor. He's the one who starts this mythological journey, right? You always have the call to action for a myth. Mm-hmm. You have mentors along the way, you have allies along the way, challenges, and then your reward. And sure, Obi-Wan was a cool character, but it wasn't until Ewan McGregor that I cared for Obi-Wan at all. Straight up. And even in the last ones, like Yoda becomes way cooler than Obi-Wan. But yeah, so the scene in Obi-Wan's place, you get the Force theme song, and you get the lightsaber, and you as a 13-year-old watching this, you're like, I want one of those lightsabers. That's what I want, or laser sword, or whatever, but that's all you get out of it. You clearly saw there's a backstory, but I'm not paying attention to it. I'm like, I just want the lightsaber.
Shiny stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Shiny toys.
It isn't until this, and this is where this comes where you're talking about. It isn't until Empire, it isn't until Return that story has weight.
Mm-hmm. And again, for me, Obi and Yoda doesn't have weight till I saw, Attack of the Clones. Like now all those like references of 1,000 generations of these knights, seeing it in action, it's like.
Well, that brings the weight of the Jedi.
Yeah.
But like for me growing up, those revelations that Darth Vader is Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan all this time was telling things from a certain point of view, right? Even as a kid, I appreciated the idea that somebody could be so scarred by events that happened to them that they have to tell a story that's not quite accurate to be able to even face that story, right? And so for me, and again, it's thin.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
A lot of this is just, I give you enough, dear viewer, to fill in gaps on your own, right? I didn't technically need the prequels to understand this horrible thing that must have happened between Obi-Wan and Anakin.
Mm-hmm.
For Obi-Wan to be so scarred by it that
Anakin died.
So for
he
me,
says Vader killed Anakin.
Yep.
That for him is an easier explanation to get through his life than to admit that he failed Anakin and chopped him to little pieces on the side of a lava pit, and then suddenly he became Darth Vader.
That's why for me now, revisiting the movie, it's like more weight, because I notice those things and I think about those things. And there's this amazing little cut.
The fan edit of the whole.
And it's like, it got like violins in the back. It's heartbreaking and it's timed perfectly where he's just like looking in the distance, really thinking about it. And it just cuts to the scene.
It does all the prequel stuff as flashbacks.
Oh my God.
And that makes it great.
It hit.
But I didn't need to see those things. My imagination filled them in as a kid.
I didn't need to, but
as I went back and watched New Hope after watching Empire and Jedi, I could watch that piece again and be like, man, this guy is really scarred.
Makes me rewatching those movies a lot funner nowadays.
Yeah. And that's part of why it's part of why I do love watching Revenge of the Sith, is because for me it is those moments that I dreamt about as a kid. They're not exactly the way I dreamt about them, but I appreciate that they exist.
In my mind, it's this duel it's this crazy CGI lightsaber duel, and just throws it away with one line, yeah, Vader killed Dad. I'm like, oh damn, this is crazy.
But again, the movie's very thin.
Yeah.
They get Leia. And she's a cool character. Right?
Yeah.
T? I'm looking at you as the only girl in the room.
Yeah.
I mean,
really? That's it?
Here's again, one of those things about the things that Star Wars affects the viewing. So I'm watching this movie again, and Vader goes in to interrogate her with the little droid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I've been I've been listening to the audiobooks for Aftermath again recently. And there are numerous points in time in these novels where Leia's thinking of Vader. And the fact that he tortured her on the Death Star caused pain, caused anguish, caused fear, he was brutal to her in that sequence. You don't see it on screen. It's alluded to again.
Implied, yeah.
But having recently gone through this experience with Leia in these novels, rewatching this scene brought so much more weight to it for me. I'm like, oh, that poor girl, because later she's also looking back on it, not just as Vader did that to me, but as my father did that to me. Mm-hmm. And it's incredibly painful memory for her. So all anew, watching A New Hope, I have a new appreciation for that scene because I've had it expanded again for me in some other medium, you know?
Yeah. I mean, so if I go off of what my memory was before getting all the extra information, right? My original viewing of A New Hope and stuff like that, Leia was cool because she was sassy.
Yeah.
It was the sassiness.
There's some rescue.
I mean, it was...
I don't want to move this walking carpet.
Yeah, I mean, she was curt and she was short, not just physically, but, even the way she spoke. And she is a woman that was literally surrounded by males all the time. So for me, that was my thing. Because I have grown up being surrounded and working or doing things around males all the time. So it was nice to just see this dainty girl be sassy and hold her own and basically, outshoot the boys getting out of the cell hallway. It was refreshing. It was a refreshing for me, and I guess this is my thing going back to other female heroes and stuff like that, like when we see comic book heroes and stuff. And yes, Leia's costumes weren't always the most, and I say this in many podcasts, I have mentioned the fact that I can't deal with the fact of what the strong women characters wear. And whatnot, but for me...
Leia's outfits were way less of a problem than I have with Padme's.
Yes, absolutely.
Padme's like a weird S&M fetish.
As far as Leia's goes, for the most part, other than the gold bikini outfit, but then she was a slave. It wasn't an outfit she chose to wear.
Right, she was forced to wear it.
She was forced to wear it.
Right.
There's the difference in it. The outfits she chose to wear were still, for the most part, very practical in what it was she was trying to do.
Right.
And when she was trying to be nitty-gritty and fight for her life or fight for the justice and stuff, she was just a downright simple girl,
Yeah,
And
I love her Hoth outfit.
Yeah. Yes. Very practical for what the situation was. And so for me, that's where I probably love, my princess. She's my princess. That is my princess. And the fact that she's now my Disney princess is just like that much better, because none of the other princess, Disney princesses were really my princess. She's my princess. But I loved how strong she was. Mm-hmm. And it was a real strength. And it wasn't like a forced strength or anything like that. And there was nowhere in there was she dainty or frail.
She holds her own, standing there with Tarkin.
Nowhere in there was
she lies all the way through.
She lies all the way through it. She's harsh. Nowhere in there was she stupid for what was going on around her. Or falls in love just 'cause, or, oh, he's cute.
The first damsel that's not in distress.
No damsel in distress. No.
Yeah, even when Luke pops into her cell.
Like,
I'm here to rescue you. She's like, oh.
And then within
you're a little short for a stormtrooper.
And then within 30 seconds tells them they're doing a terrible job at it. Yeah,
and then when she sees the Falcon the first time, she's like, you came in that thing? Yeah. You're braver than I thought.
Yeah. She is my character of what a strong female is. So Princess Leia then becomes General Leia and whatnot. Like she's mine. Like that one's mine. That's who I grew up with. That was my female idol. Like and if you really think about who I am and how I speak and how I do things, I'm very much a product of my princess.
Mm-hmm. But
and
again,
I'm proud of it. Like, I love it. Like, I love that that's where I am. I really do. And I love that that's where I got it from.
And it's after you're introduced to a huge Wookiee that could rip your arms off, a scoundrel that'll shoot you first, and a wizard.
You've been introduced to some big characters.
Big characters, and like, I mean, you can't. You're thinking like, all right, you can't top that, and then you get Leia. She's one of the
She's like the tiniest little thing.
The last one to be introduced. But still comes, landing.
I wouldn't say she's the last to be introduced because you do get her interaction with Vader on the Tantive 4, and then you get her interaction with Tarkin.
Yeah, right.
And then finally she's
you get to know her.
But she's the last to join the core group.
Yeah.
As part of the core group.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And but she's so strong when she comes on, and it works.
Yep.
And I think again, for as thin as the movie is, the characters are recognizable. They're archetypes, but they all have personality. They're not just slotted in and they perform a function. They're real people, and they're interesting.
And that's the thing that, like, there's plenty of sci-fi movies that were coming out at the time. There were, and there's plenty of like space Star Treks and different types of even more corny or knockoff movies that never stuck its landing. And for some reason, this movie did, and like they hit all these things at the somehow at the right right mark, or they did something right, whatever it was. Because all these movies have elements of other movies that you think, oh, that's corny, or like I can't get on board with that. But we got on board with every single little thing, which is quite an accomplishment in itself. There's not that many bandwagons that are just gonna get along because of Star Wars. Like, we fell in love with these characters on our own terms, each of us, which is a feat.
I think some of the biggest reasons why Star Wars hit was the fact that there was a certain amount of, and we've talked about this in some podcasts before, about understanding that your viewers are more intelligent than you think. And that you don't always have to lay out everything very detailed, very specific. Otherwise, they're just not going to understand it.
I think that's what pissed me off about new viewers when they ask me what's going on. Like, well, you're not giving it a shot.
Open your mind a little bit.
You're not looking at me. You're looking at me.
The information's there to get you from your points from A to B and stuff like that. Yeah, you might need to fill some of it in. But that's part of the joy and part of the excitement of especially what Star Wars storytelling is having to fill that in and talking it over with other friends and hearing what other people's opinions are and go, oh crap, I didn't fucking think of that. That's holy shit. That would make more sense of this or that happening in this. And everybody's thought process of the movies, and again, why we all rewatch them over and over again. And how many times have you rewatched some of these films and you still catch something, go, oh shit, hey,
still to the day,
holy crap, I never caught that. That makes way more sense. Or now I see how that connects now to Clone Wars or prequels or something, Last Jedi. You're like, okay, hold on, like we're bringing it all back around. There is a certain amount of the filmmakers for Star Wars, the storytellers for Star Wars, that gives the credits to their fans and viewers about being smart enough to figure it out. And I like that. Like, I like the idea of letting us help fill in the gaps. And it's amazing how much, though, we all come to the same relatively close to the same thought process. So I find it fascinating how we can get to that.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that's some of the best part of Star Wars.
To me, it's Jar Jar Binks.
You are Jar Jar.
I'm just going to put my notes down at this point.
We're not going to get through it.
Yeah, because if I try to go through every note I got, we'll never get through this.
But that's what original New Hope is. I mean, we're talking about Star Wars New Hope.
Yeah.
And what we've gone through in just this part of, God knows how long we've been going at this point, hour and a half.
We're at an hour and 30 minutes.
Hey, look at that. Hour and a half, right? This movie is what started it all, right? And yes, we've kind of jumped, but what we've jumped is how this connects us to this and that and this piece and that piece, and how going back to the prequels or going to Clone Wars or even going to the most recent movies, or like with Leia, and stuff like that. This was the start of what Star Wars is. This is what A New Hope brings. And I actually like the title A New Hope.
Yeah, I do.
Well, in the context of 9 stories,
because in context of 9 stories and the context of the fact that this was the first one we got, A New Hope makes sense to me.
And growing up, it was always interesting. I'm like, episode 4?
Episode 4.
What do you mean? Like, to come back to the...
Well, I remember being a kid and seeing an interview with George Lucas where he talked about the fact that this was a 9-story saga.
And as a kid, like, especially in that time, there were no movies that were doing 9-movie sagas,
Yeah.
Like, so that's he was ahead of his time to start thinking about like a 9.
There are interviews with Mark Hamill from like 1982, around the time they were finishing up Jedi, or right 1983, right after Jedi came out, where he said, George has 9 stories he wants to tell. He's actually talked to me about, hey, what would you think about coming back in like 20 years? And, playing an older version of Luke, who's now the mentor and handing off the, like, well, sure, that'd be really interesting. But Mark Hamill didn't believe that would ever actually happen,
I don't think any of us did. No, I don't think anyone thought that they'd ever see Luke, especially me. I never thought I'd see Luke on screen, ever, no.
Yeah.
First thing from my mind. Not in a million years.
But I think that's also the danger of why it worked for some people and didn't for others. Is that hope and that dream of seeing him on screen for years and years builds expectations, builds things that you would like to see, and then what you get isn't necessarily what you expected. And how does that sit with you? It didn't sit well with some people.
In that sense, I think it's funny. It's ironic. Never meet your heroes, right? And Last Jedi definitely didn't meet my hero,
Well, and that's the way I think Rian Johnson approached it. I mean, really, if you're sitting down writing a screenplay for meeting the biggest hero of the universe, you've got to figure while you're sitting down to write that script, at some point,
you're gonna be let down.
The classic phrase of "never meet your heroes" will roll across your mind.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a reason people say that. I've met some of my heroes, and they're still my heroes, but the kind of glossy sheen that they had before I met them has gone away because I've now seen them as regular people too. So I appreciate these amazing things that they did when I was young that I looked up to, but now they're my friends, and I look at them and I go, just a dude, who does this thing for work that I appreciate. But in the end, he's just a dude like me, maybe even more of a dirty old man than me or whatever. They just become people.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I loved about Last Jedi is in the end, as great a hero as Luke is, he was still just a person, with the same frailties and difficulties of life that we all face.
Like a regular person.
And I don't find the perfect Messiah character to be a particularly interesting character to tell a story of. Right? The guy who never makes a mistake, the guy who never fails, is not a particularly interesting person. And part of what made Luke work in A New Hope is he gets pulled under by a garbage monster. Right? And you think he's going to die. It's like he very well could have died there had the garbage compactor not turned on.
Well, we'll talk about this later with Mandalorian, but I love the fact that
he's fallible
gets tossed left and right.
And I have read a few people online who don't like that.
Oh, see, I love
it, but there are some people who don't like it. Let's get into the Battle of Yavin. Let's go ahead and skip ahead to that.
How about the Death Star first? What's your reaction to seeing some super weapon right off, as a kid?
No moon.
As a kid, the moment Obi-Wan's like, "That's no moon."
Yeah.
And for me, it's not so much in the visual; it is in Alec Guinness's look. And watching it again this week, watching the way he goes from kind of looking at the consoles and stuff and looking up, and then there's this moment.
The wide-eyed
Alec Guinness plays it so subtly, but it's all in his eyes.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? And then that very underplayed, "That's no moon. That's space station."
Seriously.
Right? And then it's equally played as well by Harrison Ford in his, no, come on. And then, wait, I think you're right. The way the two of them play. And I got to say, Harrison Ford was not known as the big movie star that he became at this point. Alec Guinness was a legend already at this point. Bridge on the River Kwai, the whole, he was acting royalty. And Harrison Ford's acting opposite this, legendary film and stage actor and totally holding his own. Right? And I got to give Harrison Ford credit, especially in this scene. It's the combination of how they both respond to this visual stimuli that we're not actually looking at anymore. We're just watching it through their eyes. The two of them sell it. Because of all the things in the movie, I think the scale of the Death Star, when they're looking at it in the distance like that, is harder to sell.
I mean, half the movie is that shot of them in the cockpit, right? And half the movie is them looking, straight past the camera and just, acting, and then and absorbing it all. I mean, they pulled it off again, they sold it to me and they sold it well, oh, we're not inside of a cave. Oh, that's no moon. Again, these are all just the same shot, just right in front of us, and it's all reaction acting. It's great.
Yeah. Well, and there's another thing that happens in this course here too, where the TIE fighter flies by, right? And to this point, Obi-Wan's been described to us as that crazy old wizard, old Ben the Hermit. He's just some crazy random desert guy, right? And then he tells Luke, "I was a Jedi Knight." You're like, what does that mean? Okay, whatever. But here they are in the thick of flying through space, and a TIE fighter goes by, and he speaks with knowledge about short-range fighters.
Too far out, yeah.
Let it go. It's not worth our time. He's got a level of experience in this.
It turns on right away.
Well,
too,
and he says it before you actually see the fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Where the Force comes in, his intuition on that.
Yeah. So again, there's not a lot given to you, but what's given to you gives you enough to fill in the blanks and understand the kind of history of this man, the larger life he's had prior to us meeting him here.
And then making his way around the Death Star and knowing, what.
Yeah. And again, I love the whole bit of Obi-Wan on the Death Star. It's back to him being the detective, the things that we loved in the prequels that we talked about on the podcast. Obi-Wan off on his own, right? Conducting a mission and getting shit done, right? That's what Obi-Wan does. He does so well.
You boys can't help me. God damn it. I knew you were going to say that.
But yeah, once they start bringing the Millennium Falcon into the Death Star and you start to get that scale again, then I'm impressed with the Death Star itself. But what sells it for me is those visuals of Alec Guinness and Harrison Ford playing what the Death Star is for us.
That was that one pet peeve I did have coming back to the Death Star when they were in it, and then they found out Leia was in there. They just left the one most important droid that the whole mission was about. The mission was getting the plans to the rebels, not saving Leia. Leia never said, "Come save me." No. Get these plans there, and then they leave them there. They left their mission in Death Star. I'm like, that was one part that I'm like, you guys didn't really think that through. Like,
those two guys were told to stay behind and wait for the shields to go down. They weren't told to go get Leia. That was the youthful exuberance of Luke, who's not thinking stuff through because he's a kid. Really, and Han being tempted by the idea of becoming rich. And again, Han doesn't care about the plans, and at that point, they don't know that it's the plans, right? At that point, they don't know that the droid's carrying anything other than that message,
Now, Luke knows about the plans.
Han doesn't.
No.
Right? Han just wants money.
Yeah.
Yep. Right?
And Luke wants the girl, I guess, at this point.
And I guess Luke's got a thing for his sister.
I do like, I think they both react, Han and Luke, when I think C-3PO asks, like, what do I do if they knock or something? Like, don't answer or something.
I hope they don't have blasters.
I love later on when the stormtroopers do come in, and the 3PO's like, they're crazy. Like, wow, well,
the smartest 3PO's ever been.
The smartest thing that droid has ever done.
And again, no acting. He's a droid. He just moves on. He just goes back.
And let's give that to Anthony Daniels. Yeah. Like, he created a character you sympathize with, you laugh with, you enjoy being with, in a character whose face never changes.
But I mean,
he managed to convey all those emotions and stuff through his body language, even in a stiff metal body. Mm-hmm. You could tell what emotional state 3PO's in. Fantastic performance from Anthony Daniels. And I'm really excited to see where 3PO goes in episode 9. We'll just leave that at that. Okay, so Battle of Yavin, right? Which, by the way, if you're into Star Wars lore, BBY, before the Battle of Yavin.
We're there.
ABY, after the Battle of Yavin.
Oh, okay.
That's how they tell time.
Is that what that acronym is?
Yeah.
I saw that somewhere, and I couldn't
remember. So when you see +3 ABY, or 3 ABY, or 3 BBY, they're saying 3 years before the Battle of Yavin, 3 years after the battle.
Oh, wow.
Because our friend Lexi Avalis, she posted on Facebook the other day, BBY, and somebody chastised her. They're like, no, this is ABY. And I had to write, no, she's saying Baby Yoda. BBY, she thinks she's saying that's Baby Yoda. I understand you're saying after the Battle of Yavin, but she's referencing the Mandalorian, so, like, ease up on the vitriol, But yes, the BBY and ABY in Star Wars are how they delineate before and after the Battle of Yavin. So, Luke in an X-Wing.
Okay.
I've got my issues with Luke flying an X-Wing. It's like, hey, I've sat behind the sticks of a Cessna-like plane, flown from here to Santa Barbara. I didn't land. I didn't do the takeoff, but I flew in the air. There's no way in hell I could get behind the stick of an F-16 and go fight anything without killing myself. Luke goes from flying his speeder or whatever, and
what kind of general first allows that to even happen?
A rebel horse.
Well, Big spoke for him.
We are that short of people. We don't care. We'll just throw you in.
We're the rebellion where we throw everybody. And it's funny, because people criticize Independence Day with the idea that these pilots who flew jets in Vietnam could suddenly fly, an F-14 Hornet or whatever. I'm like, I have less of an issue with that idea than I do with the idea that, Luke goes from shooting womp rats in his speeder in Tatooine to I'm flying a, X-Wing in the middle of battle over the Death Star. Just me. Maybe I'm being nitpicky, but even as a kid, I always found that to be a bit of a stretch.
The canyon, though, when he's down in the canyon and really getting at it, that's when I was
that canyon is one of the most iconic shots ever. It's
the canyon run.
Yeah,
awesome.
That's when I was like, I'm in Star Wars. There's wars. It's happening on stars, and this is a metal planet. Like I was 100% in by then.
And Vader's TIE fighter is badass.
Mm-hmm. And that's why,
it's a little different. I'm like, this is cool with the curved wings on the side, and
it's so distinctive.
If you read Timothy Zahn's new Thrawn novels, specifically the second one, Thrawn Alliance, which is about Thrawn and Anakin in the past, and Thrawn and Vader in the shortly before the Battle of Yavin timeframe. Vader's flying an experimental TIE fighter.
Cool.
That Thrawn and his cronies have been putting together. And Vader greatly enjoys it. Faster and more maneuverable and, kind of better to fly.
And again, Darth Vader, with his one-liners.
And I can't help, I haven't double-checked everything, but I can't help but wonder if that's, the new canon novels kind of filling in a gap on Vader's different TIE fighter. Because he's immediately I want more of these.
I have you now.
I have you now. I think the tension building through that whole bit is really good. Again, sense of scale and stuff. You're really close on the X-Wings as they fly by, and then they get small as the Death Star looms over them in the distance, and the big giant planet of Yavin is so big you can't see all of it ever, just the edges of it.
What I like about the X-Wing is just that attack formation is attack formation. The whole ship itself configures to a fighting maneuver. That in itself gives character to the X-Wing itself. It's another extension of that, which I liked.
Well, it gives, in a weird way, it gives the whole fakeness of this universe some weird realness, right? Because you can compare it to things like the Tomcat,
might be able to understand,
right? Whose wings would sweep back to go faster, and it draws some sort of physical parallel to the real world. And I mean, you don't need those wings in space, but we're human beings and we look at things from our perspective from here. And
then you get the TIE fighter, and and
the TIE fighter is very spaced, right? How does that thing even function in the air? When
doesn't need to be in function
in the planet, but it's, the X-Wings are cool because we can recognize them as something familiar.
Right.
And that's why I think the Rebels ships and the TIE fighters are very alien to
You're able to relate to the Rebels, a little bit, but
they're the alien thing that they're battling against. So again, getting to that production design, color and whatever, the TIE fighters are black and gray. Mm-hmm. The X-Wings are white and red or white and orange. They have color, and their colors very similarly match the planet they're flying around. And Yavin's green, right? Where the base is, it's green and it's beautiful blue sky.
One of the best, I love it. I always think of that, knowing it was an old Jedi temple, and then also Rebel base. I love Yavin more than anything.
I'm always curious what that Sentry is going to do with his little tiny gun against the Millennium Falcon as it's coming down.
So, Theresa, do you have any thoughts on the Battle of Yavin? No? Teresa's that's all just fighter stuff. I don't care.
No.
What I don't like about this moment is it puts all the emphasis on the boys and kind of takes Leia out of the story.
Yeah, she's just in the back.
She's just nervously watching stuff at that
It's
point.
her character. What else would she be doing? You know, she's a princess. She's general.
I would have liked to have seen her doing more battle commanding or something at that point. You know, like
Formation.
you see more of that in Empire, right? She's commanding troops. She's refusing to leave the command center because she's busy getting people out, and Han's got to drag her ass out of there. You know. This is where she kind of starts to look a little bit like a damsel in distress in this movie, and it bothers me just a little bit. It's her and 3PO being nervous together, which I like how they answer all that in the new movies, and we'll get to that when we review the new movies, but she tells 3PO to, you know, don't look at me like that. Don't be nervous. Like when it's the two of them in the command center and he's getting all flustered. He's like, stop it.
Nervous.
You know?
Off your face. I'm sorry. I have this only face I got.
You know. So for me, they kind of like answered that problem of her just being nervous on a bridge with 3PO in the new movie. Tell 3PO to stop looking at her like that.
I can dig that. I can get on board with that.
So, you know, again, we all have our things. And I think for somebody, maybe, possibly it was Carrie Fisher, because she helped Rian Johnson craft a lot of those stories for The Last Jedi.
Interesting.
Especially a lot of the beats for Leia. I have a feeling that was her way of also trying to tackle that situation. So.
Use the Force.
The final medal scene.
Yep.
Throne room. Good music.
Great music. 3PO and R2 all polished and shiny. I've always loved that.
Did you notice that?
I never looked better ever again in the entire
No, ever.
series.
It's so funny. You think of Luke's iconic looks throughout the years, but the yellow jacket's never really won. You really think of it, and then you look,
But it's his coolest look.
Yeah.
But you look at it, and then you're like,
yeah.
that's Finn's jacket. Yeah. It's the exact same jacket, just with different colors. It's got the same patterns on top.
Does it have the ribbing?
Yeah.
I didn't catch that. Huh?
Or you guys ever have the problem with Chewie not having a medal?
Well, that's where we're getting at.
Yeah. And I think I mentioned this in one of the podcasts a while back, but Carl Sagan himself brought that up on the Johnny Carson show.
Really?
The Tonight Show. Somewhere in 78
That's
or
awesome.
79, Carson asked Carl Sagan what he thought of Star Wars. And his big comment was, well, you know, it's a fine program. But I have one issue. They seem to not care much for the Wookiee. Like, he was there. Why didn't he get a medal?
It's funny. Peter Mayhew came out with an interview too. He's like, they never explained to me why I never got a medal, but I do have the last word in the film.
That's true. And he barks at all of them and gets them all to come about. You know, I'm like, Chewie commands some attention through the scene. I think he doesn't get a medal because he's not the pilot of the Falcon, and he's not the pilot of the X-Wing that actually took down the deal.
Yeah, he's still second.
Well, the second to last thing I have a problem with, where it's just the scene. Luke lands, you know, Han comes up, and then they're all three hugging. They walk away all smiling, and then just cuts. I'm like, I forget the line what Luke or Leia says, but I don't know. I think it was like, I felt like so rushed.
I knew you were about more than money.
Yeah, and then that's it, and straight to the, you know. It felt like you know, when you're editing a piece at the end and you're like, I just want to get it done, like you know,
just rush through it,
and I think the last two scenes it was rushed. Like they could have done something. I wasn't satisfied. The medal almost gave me that, but the scene before it was like, you know, just they're laughing, they're hugging. I don't know, give me something a little bit more deeper, like I don't know.
Well, I mean, right up to that, I mean, you've got Luke actually caring and worrying about R2.
Yeah.
Two pieces.
Yeah.
Is Luke caring about it?
Yeah, for a second.
Because my notes
for a second.
my notes specifically say Luke doesn't give a crap. Because 3PO's like, oh, I'm glad to give him. I mean, 3PO's distraught.
Absolutely.
Right? 3PO is totally, I'm glad to give my parts if it'll help, and Luke's just like, he'll be all right. Off you go.
Well,
Yeah, he totally cares. No.
Yeah, and that's where the three of them go off, because then again they just feel like, oh, it's just a droid.
So maybe now that I hear you say that was the line Leia said, it was about the money thing. See, maybe that's what I don't like about it. It's like such a backhanded compliment. It's like oh, you saved the day, you worthless scumbag. It's it wasn't. Maybe that's why.
Well, this is from the same woman who consoled Luke about Han earlier with, he's got to follow his own path. She was the one who was very Han is Han.
Yeah.
You can't change him
right away.
It's not your place to make him see the light.
I did like how Luke was so distraught about it, though. That was interesting. You just met this guy. Yeah.
Well, Luke had lost everything at that point.
Yeah.
Right. So he was clinging to any sort of familiarity he had, and at that point, Han was really it. That was all he had left to be familiar with.
And Han, too, he's like, oh, we could use.
He met Han on Tatooine.
Yeah.
That was the last connection to Tatooine he had at that point. Short of Biggs, but Biggs.
I mean,
May he rest in peace.
Biggs. When did he?
Porkins.
He makes it through all of the original series, right? The original trilogy. Biggs.
No, Biggs died when Wedge took off.
Mm-hmm.
Did he get Wedge?
So Wedge made it all the way through.
Wedge, right? Yeah.
And we might see Wedge in episode 9.
I told Mikey who Wedge the actor was.
Dennis Lawson.
Uh-huh.
Ewan McGregor's uncle.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yep.
Yeah. So, yeah, fun to see those scenes again and revisit. Biggs is it's interesting if you know the history of the movie, and if you got the Blu-ray version, you can see the deleted scenes with Biggs on Tatooine when Biggs comes back and talks about how he's going to go to the rebellion and do whatever. And Biggs was a big part of Luke's motivation to try and get off Tatooine and whatever, but he's this fleeting little moment in Luke's rebel experience, and he's gone, and you don't ever see Luke mourning for Biggs.
Oh.
Well, so here, this is going into the further movies, and this is where people having this high esteem for Luke Luke has never had, again, a real proper training, because all of his mentors at some point die shortly after meeting him. He doesn't.
Biggs dies. Obi-Wan dies. Yoda dies.
He doesn't get a proper training. He has to train himself through
books. I've said that for years.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reason Luke vanishes and goes on these quests is he's trying to find knowledge.
Because no one else can do it.
How different, Luke at his old age compared to, Obi-Wan at that same age. There's two different Jedis, so further from each other.
Again, proper training, ish.
Proper training, and then
Whiny Skywalker.
The Skywalkers are a pretty whiny bunch.
They're a whiny bunch. I mean, that's just.
I was going to go to the Tashi Station and pick some paragraphs.
You can mess around with your friends.
So, I love A New Hope. I'm glad we got to review it.
About 15 minutes of it.
We got 15 minutes and then we jump to the end. Just like the movie, man. That's how it happens. It's
middle part.
I just started this movie. It's already over? What the fuck?
It is the movie that started the mythology of Star Wars.
And it's
great. But you get way more into the mythology and everything in my opinion, Empire.
Yeah. The discussion next week on Empire is going to be a really interesting one.
Oh, that'll be
because that is where Star Wars found its weight.
Yep.
For sure. The scenes on Dagobah, even the stuff in Cloud City, all of it just carries so much more weight to the story than you got in this film.
Yep.
Yeah.
But this film is what launched it all, and this film is what everything constantly is referring back to. And I know we're going to eventually review the episodes of The Mandalorian, but these first two episodes of The Mandalorian, man, their ties to this movie are so tight.
Oh, yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, crazy. From the visuals, And granted, a lot of this movie had that kind of classic spaghetti western or samurai film feel to it. Yeah. And that's what The Mandalorian is tapping into, is that same kind of original inspiration. But you can't look at anything in Star Wars without referencing it back to this movie specifically.
And it just blows my mind that it's, what, an 80-minute runtime? Like at most, or like, what, 90? And it started all this, and exactly, I mean, this discussion is like...
This discussion is now 2 minutes and 3...
Runs longer than the actual movie itself that started, for 40 years of...
You clearly haven't listened to our other ones.
This is, I think, the shortest one so far.
Really?
But guys, thank you for taking the time out of our work week here in Austin to sit down and chat with me and our listeners about Star Wars: A New Hope. I really appreciate it. Do you have any final thoughts before we sign out?
Great film, just fun. It's just fun.
It's fun.
It
is fun. It's an adventure.
Yes, and a lot of it. Especially when I was a kid, you take a lot of it just as face value. You're right. It's a thin movie, but you don't really think about it. You're just having fun the entire time.
Yeah, it doesn't take itself too seriously.
No.
With like mouse droids and all that stuff. It just doesn't take itself too seriously.
Yeah, and this is the movie that introduced me to my favorite villain of all time, Vader. Just the look of it was just like, okay, I'm in. It wasn't until later you get the whole weight again, but It was just like, this guy's got a cool backstory.
Yeah. Jar Jar Lopez, your final thoughts?
I mean, opening sequence will always stick in my mind, for life. Even though it wasn't my first, real exposure to Star Wars. Yeah, I mean, I'm never not going to recognize it as, the beginning.
Right.
Though the one and all, my reference point to all of what I know is Star Wars.
Yeah. Theresa?
This is the start of my princess. Really? I mean, this is what it was.
Yeah.
I am happy that the films that followed with her continued her strength, and she just got better and better, which just made it happier for me. But yeah, this movie will always be, for me, it's about Leia. It isn't about Vader or Luke or Obi-Wan, but for me, this movie is about Leia, and this is my princess movie.
I will say that this is what introduced me to probably the most iconic soundtrack of all time. John Williams.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
It gets better as the series.
It's better and better, but what a start.
That first,
and I think too, that's one of the, and it's been talked about by people for years and years, but the music in this movie is part of what propelled it to the stars for the audience, right?
Well, let's talk about the beat. He's talking about the Star Wars logo comes up, and you get that first
opening fanfare.
Okay, that opening fanfare, how much of it now, because enough of us experience the new movies coming out and stuff like that, how much does that just hit you? As soon as you hear it and you feel it coming out.
You hear the entire orchestra hit one note together.
It's probably, and
it's an exhilarating moment.
That note and that hitting that, if someone heard that, majority of people would be like, hey, it's Star Wars. One note.
I completely forgot to mention the 2 times I saw New Hope at the orchestra with the Live Orchestra.
Yeah.
Chills.
I have to do that.
At Embarcadero?
Goosebumps, yeah. And then I'm watching it with nothing but super fans,
Right.
I forgot to do a whole spiel about that, but I'll get into it next time.
We could do a whole conversation just about the music.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. And for all of you who are still with us, thank you for riding this one all the way through.
True fan.
We will be reviewing The Empire Strikes Back
and ideally actually get through the whole movie.
I think we will.
Sure.
We have a lot more movies.
Depends on who all's in the conversation.
Yeah. But no, it's fantastic. I love these conversations. I hope that you out there are loving these conversations and that you're enjoying them as well. Don't forget that you can call in. We'd be happy to include your thoughts on The Empire Strikes Back. You can call us at 760-456-9469. That's 760-456-9469. Just leave us a voicemail with your thoughts on The Empire Strikes Back, and you'll be featured in next week's episode. Until then, from Austin, Texas, we've been
Mike Peterson,
Jar Jar Binks,
Theresa Dawson,
and I'm Dave Dawson, and this has been the Sci-Fi Sunday Podcast version 2.0 in-depth review of Star Wars A New Hope. We'll see you all later, and may the Force be with you.